we actually send you an email that says, Daniel, thank you for being a Mint customer. We've been looking at your usage and you only use 8 gigabytes of data a month. You don't need unlimited. We're recommending you pay us less going forward. You move to our more affordable 10 gigabyte plan, which will save you $10 a month off of what you're already paying us. And if at any point you need more data, you can always upgrade and we'll prorate the difference. Super consumer centric, all outside in thinking, and our unlimited plan launched with this concept and it has been phenomenal. And we knew the marketplace didn't want unlimited or want another unlimited plan, so we had to do something different.
Welcome to How I Made It in Marketing from Marketing Sherpa. We scour pitches from hundreds of creative leaders and uncover specific examples, not just trending ideas or buzzword-laden schmaltz, real-world examples to help you transform yourself as a marketer. Now, here's your host, the Senior Director of Content and Marketing at Marketing Sherpa, Daniel Burstein, to tell you about today's guest.
This equation is music to my ears. Creative is greater than production. Remember that. Creative is greater than production. That's a lesson from today's guest who works for a pretty well-known brand. You've probably heard of it. And yet he's going up against some of the biggest media and production budgets in the world, literally. So it's great to hear that creative can win because after all, you, me, if you're a marketer or entrepreneur, this is the core asset we have to offer the world, our ideas, our creativity. He's also going to share stories from what he's made with lessons like, if you aren't failing, then you aren't trying hard enough, and trust your gut. Plus, he'll tell us what he's learned from the people he's collaborated with in his career. I want to welcome Aaron North, the Chief Marketing Officer at Mint Mobil. Thanks for being here, Aaron.
Thank you, Daniel. Good to see you.
So I'm going to just quick rundown of your LinkedIn, just cherry pick a few things so people know who I'm talking to. I saw you were Vice President and Account Director at Young and Rubicam Brands. You worked on a special advertising project for Pizza Hut. Sounds interesting. Director of Advertising and Branded Content at Taco Bell. And now you're the Chief Marketing Officer at Mint Mobile. But you also told me you're the commercial owner. So what does that mean?
Yeah, I have a really, really interesting sort of career path to here. And what that means is, so Chief Marketing Officer, standard accountabilities you would expect, but the commercial owner within our group means that this is the single person in the organization who is responsible for growth, responsible for sort of healthy growth, I should say. It is profitable growth. And what are our strategic plans? How are we pricing? Where are we moving with the product, the service, the brand? But I guess if you had to boil it down to something very simple, being both the commercial owner and the chief marketing officer, I'm often faced with the question of who wins. And the two audiences I'm trying to make both win are the consumer and the company. So many times when we do initiatives, whether they be a promotion or a new product launch or a new business line, I'm guiding the decision making and having lots of conversations with our team about what the impact will be to the consumer or the potential consumer, and also how it will impact the organization, which has been a really, really exciting growth opportunity for me in my career, because oftentimes as marketers, we only think about the customer and we're less concerned about the org or the entity. And here you get to do both, which is really phenomenal.
Well, I think there's a lot we can all learn from you because, sometimes when I hear marketers complain about, they didn't get this budget approved or that approved, a lot of times is because they aren't taking that other perspective, right? Like, I feel like as marketers, we're good at marketing to the customer, but internally we do a poor job, right? And not just trying to market and sell our ideas, but to truly understand the people, like the key decision makers in our organization, a chief financial officer. What's their day like? What are they going through? Like, what do we need to do to serve them to get these things approved, right? So that's
absolutely.
Great.
And I work hand in hand all the time with our chief financial officer and our CEO, because the decisions we're making as the brand continues to explode in growth have large consequences and large ramifications. Hopefully always on the positive side, though.
Hopefully. Well, and it's interesting you also said healthy growth, because stay tuned. We're going to talk about a mind-bogglingly large growth number at one point. If you read Marketing Sherpa, we have a lot of growth numbers. This one is mind-bogglingly large. We're going to get to that. But first, let's go through some of the things you made earlier in your career. You know, as we talk about here, we as marketers, we're pretty fortunate, right? Like I've never had any other career or job really, but I don't know, it seems like if you're an accountant or a dentist or all these other jobs, you don't really walk away having made things and having that feeling. So let's talk about some of the things you made. And this first lesson comes from what you made in your education, walking away from it. You said, if you aren't failing, then you aren't trying hard enough. How did you learn this lesson?
Yeah, this is a lesson from college, and it's a long time ago for me, but it's stuck because the point a marketing professor was making was there are times in your life where risk is more acceptable. Earlier in your career, you can fail, right? The consequences are individual for the most part. Like it's going to have an impact on maybe your current opportunity, something you're working on, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But later on in life, when you have a mortgage and a family and all these things that like really sort of intimidate you a bit and want you to take on less risk, my professor was saying, if you're not pushing the bounds and if you're not failing, you aren't going to the edge. You aren't going into the unproven, the unknown, the untried. And that is a real miss because in marketing, a lot of what makes us special is the fact that we're willing to go out and try something that had never been done before, to go take a flyer on a program, right? It's worth it because if you never do, you'll never know. And I think that's sort of the counter to this. And it's really critical that as marketers, we're on the bleeding edge a lot of times of communication, storytelling, the ability to be in front of the customer. So I preach to my team that it's okay to fail. And I actually push very, very hard that we are constantly failing. I set aside a component of my media budget to make sure the team knows this money is allocated to the unproven, the unknown, the untested. And what ends up happening there is even with a low success rate, right? Even if 10% of your budget is there and only 10% of it hits, which is basically 1%, that 1% can be absolutely transformative. So I love getting involved with the alphas and the betas and the new things that have never been done, or pushing volume or spend to a new uncharted level. I love doing that because we're always approaching it with what can we learn, how can we be better? And if we fail, because it's a small piece of our budget and because we're willing to take risk and because it's been there from day zero, we don't feel the negative impacts of these misses. They've always been part of our business, but boy, when we hit one, it gives us the green light to scale. And that I feel is one of the ways we've been able to grow this brand so quickly is our willingness to take risk.
I think that's beautiful for two reasons. So one, we really have a culture of experimentation we teach through our content, and people would ask me, they're like, well, how does that really work in practice? Because that's kind of scary. And just a quick shout out to our CEO, because Philip McLaughlin, he did this awesome thing very publicly once. We'd run a test, just a simple email test as an invite for something. And the brand new writer, just fresh out of school, I think, tested against our CEO's headline. And the writer won. And the great thing was we had this big event at the Aria in Las Vegas. Right before this event, he was right about to go on stage. So I want to give him a hard time because he's a very confident speaker. And I was like, you think you're so great teaching all these people about email marketing? Look, our new guy, Paul, just beat your test. And what he did surprise me. He's like, great. He's like, get in the slides. That's my opening. And his opening was, whoever wants a refund, here's a test I just ran. And, the new guy just beat me. And what better way, as a marketing leader, what better way to teach your company? Hey, it's good to fail. You gotta go out there and try something new. But I think of one other thing real quick. When you mentioned that VC, venture capital guy was interviewing, and I was asking him about how failure works. And he's like, look, we're expecting to fail. And that's kind of seems like what you're telling me, right? Like we're expecting to fail because what happens is when we succeed, it's asymmetrical, right? We'll fail, we'll lose this, we'll lose that here. But when we hit it big. And it sounds like that's what you're talking about. Like you got to plan to fail some so that you can sometimes get those grand slams.
Right. And my team knows how I feel about failure. If they're listening, they're probably already rolling their eyes. But I always say we've got to fail fast, fail forward, fail smart, and fail cheap. Those are sort of my contextual framework, or that is my contextual framework for how you fail. Because if you really think about that, a failure is not a failure because you've gained learnings. And we may not sort of explicitly state it, but we run the scientific method. So hypothesis, experimentation, observation, analysis, optimization. We are doing that at a speed and cycle rate that is unheard of. If you're not going to allow failure as part of that, that model won't work.
That's cool. And I mean, I got to say, it's just more enjoyable.
Oh, it's so fun.
One thing, being in marketing, I don't know if you've ever felt this way, Aaron, but always felt like, there's those egos in the room. And so when you go in and into any room, whether you're talking to business folks or you're an agency or talking to clients, there's this feel like you've got to know everything and you've got to go there, you've got to give them the answer and it's got to work. But having that feeling, like you said, of like, hey, let's set up a hypothesis and I've got this crazy idea. I get crazy ideas all the time, right? That's what creatives do. I've got this crazy idea. It's a hypothesis. Let's try it out. Let's see what happens.
Oh, absolutely. And for us, the ideas come from everywhere. So as our group has grown, not only do they come from the marketing team, they may come from the e-commerce team, the media team, the product, like the ideas surface from all over the place. So we love it. We encourage it. And, it's been one of those things where new folks, it takes an adjustment, right? If you're a seasoned vet, you come here, that is a very different approach than most are used to. You don't see the big multinational conglomerates embracing risk, right? They have a lot to lose. They're very protective of what they've built. We're young, we're scrappy, we're willing to risk and take risk because the upside is so enormous. And I encourage it.
And let me ask you about hiring for that. I think we're going to get into hiring a little later, and we did an article about some of your recruiting practice at Mint Mobil, which was very cool. But something I've seen when I would interview, one of the most illustrative questions would be, tell me about a time you failed, tell me about a mistake you make, that sort of thing, and seeing how people reacted. And even to the point on Glassdoor, there was one woman I interviewed who every failure story was more like how really kind of the art director failed, the designer, someone else. It was never quite her. And I kept pushing to try to get that failure story. Even on Glassdoor, I finally got the review of like, why does this guy keep wanting to talk about failure? It's a job interview. I want to talk about my successes. So how do you do that in your interviews? How do you kind of search for that right type of person who's okay to take a more hypothesis-driven approach?
Well, I think, first off, I like to really simplify the interview process. I let folks know right up front that we're going to have a conversation. So sort of diffuse the tension out of it. And I like people who are sort of self-conscious. And if you're telling me how perfect you are, you're already not a good fit for us because none of us are perfect over here. We make mistakes constantly. And that's okay because it's a family and we're people and we encourage each other and we try to lift each other up. But when you're interviewing someone, you can tell in how they answer, not just what they answer, but how they answer. I think one of the neatest things is to understand what decisions did you make that led to failure? Was it early? Was the hypothesis incorrect? Or was it the application of the experiment or whatever you're doing, the program that got? And what I like to understand is where was the bad decision, but where was the decision made that led to an unsavory result? And if you can't really answer that, that's a problem because now you can't diagnose where the issue is. And that's really what we're looking for is people who have obviously good ideas and a large volume of ideas that are high quality, but you have to be able to go back and be critical of yourself and understand what decisions you made that led to an outcome you didn't want. So that way, that's the optimization piece. It's okay to get a bad result, but if you can't optimize, that was a wasted test.
Great. Let's switch gears a little. Let's talk about when you were earlier in your career. You were on the other side of that interview. You were getting interviewed. You said a lesson was trust your gut. You kind of learned this early at Taco Bell. So how did you first learn it in the interview process there and then working there?
Yeah. So I was leaving the agency world. So I'd spent 10 plus years agency side. And as everybody who's ever worked on an agency knows, an agency is really a consultant, if you will. You're outside. Your job is to present the best creative solutions you possibly can for the business challenge of your client. The client makes the decision. You make the recommendation. When I transitioned to Taco Bell, that was a big transition because now you are the decision maker. And in my interview with the CMO at the time, David Evans, I asked, why don't you put a lobster taco on the menu? It seems obvious to me, being a Southern California guy, lobster tacos are popular, you should do this. And he was an Aussie. He goes, mate, let me tell you, I'm an Aussie and we love the ocean. There ain't enough lobster in the ocean for Taco Bell. And that sort of made my head explode because I heard it, I didn't understand it. So I asked more questions like, what do you mean? And he said, to support 6 weeks of a promotion at Taco Bell, we would fish the ocean dry of lobster. And that was, I'd never heard anything like that, right? And I ultimately got the job and I got to work there and I saw it multiple times, like Taco Bell changed from Mexican inspired rice, which is sort of an orange rice, to a white rice with cilantro in it. The organization had to go year plus in advance and cut deals and negotiate with farmers in the Central Valley of California because there wasn't enough cilantro on the planet to meet the demand of Taco Bell's rice. So that happens and you start to get this sense of scale. You're like, holy shit, if I make a bad call here, this has got millions of dollars written on it, either right or wrong. Like, it's insane. The company, the day I joined, was doing $5 billion a year in sales.
Wow.
So you begin to question your decision-making ability very quickly when that happens. Well, at least I did, because I was used to being an outsider or a person who provides a recommendation. Now I was making the call on decisions that seemed massive, and I stopped trusting my gut. My boss hated that. And she was incredible. She really pushed me hard to go, look, we've hired you because you're a good marketer. We're going to help turn you into a great marketer, but you've got good instincts. And it's important you trust those instincts because if you question them, you're really questioning the root of the idea. And really what's scaring you is the potential bad outcome. Don't be afraid of that. Make the right call. Trust your instincts. Sure, you might need to do some more diligence before you make a formal recommendation because the impacts are big, but don't abandon what you instinctively feel is right because that is bad for a marketer. And that has really served me well. I mean, I did that all of my career beforehand, but just the scale of the decision-making was so big, I was questioning myself, and she really ground that into me. And from there, I've taken that and really brought that with me in my career.
That's interesting. So how do you kind of balance that with the discussion we just had? So the discussion we just had, very, hypothesis driven, look at data, I would say, and outcomes, and the trust your gut. How do you kind of balance those two?
Well, if you remember when I said failure is absolutely okay, provided we're failing smart, fast, forward, and cheap. Okay? Mm-hmm. We don't put 100% of our media budget into risk. We put 10% of our media budget into risk. We're willing to, or I should say, we have an appetite for that 10% to be volatile. We don't have an appetite for the entire business to be volatile. So what I'll do is I'll look at a hypothesis and I'll say, what kind of scale does this have and how big of a scale are we willing to work on now? But I'll give you a perfect example, like real life. We run Mint Mobil as a direct-to-consumer business. Everybody knows direct-to-consumer business. You've got CRO, conversion rate optimization. We've probably got anywhere between 7 and 10 tests going on at any moment. The scale of those tests vary. The things that are higher risk go to a smaller audience. We want to get learnings and stable data, but we're willing to take more time because the risk is higher. Things that seem low risk will bring in a larger audience and get through it faster. That way we can apply the learning if there's something there. So I think this is where being the CMO and the commercial officer comes in. It's like, what's the potential upside and downside of a decision and how big do we want to make it as a result of that?
That's great. And, another place trust your gut comes in. One of the earlier podcast interviews I did was with Michelle Burrows, who's also a CMO. And she was talking about, where she really struggled to trust her gut, especially lately, was with hiring. Because it's been so hard to, hiring to bring in the right people that sometimes she'd just be like, you know what, we have the need, let me go for it. Let me hire. And she said, what happens is 2 months, you got 2-3 months of wasted time. And it's like, boom, now, I probably should have trusted my gut and kind of waited for that right person. Or on the flip side, coming into a new organization where you talk about is like, okay, there's that, one person or two people that don't fit with the team. They're an underperformer, don't want to shake up the team. But then when she ultimately did and trusted her gut and did it, it's like, wow, the team like exhaled and said, oh, that person was the cog, kind of the screen, messing everything up. So how does the trust your gut bit come into hiring? Because it sounds like you do have a very kind of personal conversation-based hiring where I'm guessing you're getting a real feel for that person.
I do. So this is healthy or not, it's a decision I've made and I've stuck with, and that is I interview every single person who's coming into the marketing department, period. It does not matter if this is your first job or if you're a 25, 30-year veteran. It's really important to me that the dynamic within the group be phenomenal. I'll interview people who are so sophisticated and so smart. There is no chance, there's no way in hell I can understand what they do. And I tell them that right up front. Hey, just so you know, Daniel, I'm interviewing you today and we're gonna have a conversation. I know you are a mobile device analytics expert in this software package. You could lie to me this entire interview about your technical ability, so I'm not even gonna ask you a technical question. Let's talk about like how you work, how you make decisions, and tell me a little bit about you. Because the one thing that is incredibly special here at Mint is that, and it's so cliche, but I could go on for an hour and give you firsthand stories of how we're not just coworkers and employees. Like we're the marketing department in particular, because this is a group I'm very well invested in, is a family. And there are times where some of my employees have had children, and I know that my wife and I, when we had our child, that first 2 weeks was crazy, but like somebody brought us a home cooked meal and we were almost in tears because there's only so much Taco Bell you can eat when you're a new parent and fast food. So I did that for one of my employees just because I could tell they needed it. And sure enough, brought it over. Look, it was nothing fancy. It was meatloaf night at my house. So, we brought a second meatloaf over. But when she started crying in joy, I'm like, look, it's okay. We get it. Like, I was there. We want to help you, but please don't think about work. You're on maternity leave. Just wanted to make sure you're taken care of. And I see that amongst all of our teams. So I'm looking when I interview people for people who can bring that to the team. And I think Southwest Airlines said it the best. We hire nice. We can teach people the operational components of loading a plane or these other things, but we want to hire nice. So I want to hire people that I want to be around, that are amazing people who have the right sort of lens on business and the lens on family. And then you're going to have enough technical acumen to do the job, but we'll teach you our way. But I want good, high quality people first.
Yeah, I love that because, what really strikes me, I've always felt in the interview process, sometimes we spend more time with these people than people we've made marital vows to, than people we've helped to make. So I think it's really so crucial and important that the type of people you work with. So
yeah, and I've had teams come to me and say, we're all green. This is a go. It's Aaron, rubber stamp it. I meet the person and something doesn't sit with me right. And we've made calls where I'm like, I don't know, I've got a red flag here. And that's your gut and your instinct. And I always let the team make the final call. It's not my job to say no. It's my job to go, hey, there's a yellow flag here. You have my support if you think it's right, but this is a person who we just need to keep an eye on because I'm concerned about X, Y, and Z. And I'm not right every time. I'm happy to admit mistakes. But I've got a pretty good close rate on like identifying if a person's going to be a good fit or a bad fit for the team.
I think one reason it's so good to get that right team for everyone too, but I would say if you don't mind, I think it's kind of like a David Brand versus the Goliath. Is that an okay way to talk about? Yeah. And so this is one reason I love this next lesson you talk about is creative is greater than production. And I love this because for any brand out there going against bigger competition, sometimes it could feel hard to go against those giant budgets where, maybe they don't need to be as effective because they're just everywhere and they've got the biggest spokespeople and, the Super Bowl ads and the crazy production. So what have you learned how did you learn this lesson that creative is greater than production?
Well, yeah. And the antithesis of that is if you can't play good, play loud, right? Because that's a lot of what you see in our sector. I mean, we're going against gargantuan companies. These are like, you look at their 10Ks and their 10Qs and you're like, Jesus Christ, these are massive, massive entities. So yes, when we started this, I mean, when you build a brand, you start with nothing. You have 0 customers. So we started at 0. Like I was here for day 0. What we had found, and look, we're a young, high growth company. Ultra Mobile, our sister brand, when I joined the company, the reason I was recruited here was that Ultra was the fastest growing private company in America in 2015. I came on board in 2016 and, growing Ultra, but also how do we start this new thing? So you don't start with a massive budget. You start by testing and learning. And one of the things we learned right away was that to cut through the noise, we had to be provocative and we had to push creativity. The approach we took was we positioned our brand as an outlaw archetype. And for us, that gave us, from a positioning standpoint, the permission to speak out and speak against the space. So we took a very disruptive tone. We pushed against category norms. We used profanity early on, and our mascot is a fox. So we used to bleep out fox, and it just looked like the F word. And then afterwards, we'd always say, but we said fox, or we said foxing. And I had to test it. I needed some way to cut through, and it worked. So to me, that was really exciting because we started to push against, and creativity or language or creative was cutting through to the point where the brand had really good success its first couple of years and went into phenomenal success after that. But we were Super Bowl buyers, by the way. I bought a Super Bowl spot. So this is pre-Brian, sort of crazy. Mint was testing television work for the first time. We went out and shot a 3-package piece of work, so a campaign with 3 different executions. I knew I had something special in 2 of the ads. All 3 were good. 2 were like, whew, this is gonna, people are gonna react to this. The first spot was called Finger Dipping, where you had folks at a party and they were sticking their fingers into dip. And like, it was so, that's not right. And that really tapped into a pure insight that we had. And the insight was people can't believe our product can be any good for $15 a month. And we were literally hearing back from the consumers that can't be right. There must be a mistake. So we took that human truth and put it into our work. And we did it in a way that was so over the top and creative, with people putting their fingers into dip, a gentleman taking a shower in a shower that was made out of carpet, so carpet showers. And then the third and final one, which was our Super Bowl spot, was chunky style milk, which is just about the most repulsive thing you've ever seen, that we put on the largest national stage we have here in the US, which is a Super Bowl ad. And that was an instance where it was incredibly high risk, high reward. And that was one that I put my name on, but I had data to back it up. So I was willing to take that risk because I had run finger dipping. I had run carpeted showers. So I knew or had an idea what would happen for chunky style milk during the Super Bowl. But none of those were high production ads. They were all shot in one group, and I saved that one spot for Super Bowl. We probably spent, I can't even tell you what the ad ended up costing me in production dollars, but it had to have been under $100,000. And I can guarantee you, most of the Super Bowl advertisers spent more on that in music or licensing or talent than we had for the entire production. So we were ranked number 1 most memorable ad in the Super Bowl. People told us it was gross. It was disgusting, but the thing we knew was that it was memorable. So for me, this brand has always had creativity over production. And with the introduction of Ryan Reynolds, Ryan buying the business and becoming an owner, that team is all about creativity over spectacle, which is really, really fantastic because it aligns with what we're doing and it allows us to, quite frankly, do work that is so much fun because the idea is so good. And it's not, okay, we're gonna go out and get Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction, and that's how we're gonna open the spot, which I have done before. It's not, and then we're gonna have fireworks and explosions and this and that, which I have done before. It's we're gonna build a character, we're gonna have a neat idea, we're gonna do something so different, nobody's gonna expect it. We're gonna recycle an old ad, we're gonna turn it upside down. That's it. We're going to turn the ad upside down and re-record the VO. Like, these are the things we do now because they're so neat and interesting. And I love it because our customers on board, they get the idea, right? We don't spend money on spectacle. That way we can save that money and bring you premium wireless for $15. We spend our money on narrative and storytelling and having fun. And I think people appreciate that about the brand.
Yeah, so that's really key, and I wanted to touch on that. So when you said you try to be provocative and stick out there, I think something that comes to mind for me is like the GoDaddy ads, which maybe there was a good value proposition or point behind them. I might have missed it at the time, right? Or I think of there was a famous Microsoft launch with Jerry Seinfeld and Bill Gates. I don't know if you remember that one. And I'm a huge Seinfeld fan. I just really didn't understand how them shopping for speakers. I don't even remember where they were selling. So, but what you talk about when you talk about these provocative ads, there's a value proposition and a strategy behind it, right? Like you said, we don't spend money on X, so we can continue to give you premium wireless for just $15 a month. Right? I mean, that's right. Really, is that where the ad starts? And then you're like, okay, what's a provocative way to communicate that?
Yeah, and I think it didn't start that way. It just sort of, that's what people are, like, it was a natural progression. We also keep things very light and very simple. For us, all great creative, like, this is something I preach constantly. And I spend a ton of my time on writing a creative brief. And our creative briefs, under 50 words total on the whole brief. We have a really, really excellent template that I'm very proud of. It sort of was created or founded back in the Taco Bell days, and I've kept it with me because it is so good, because there's not a lot there. And what I believe is that all great creative is born out of an insight, and to me, an insight is a universal human truth. It is not an observation. I mean, that's actually one of my big questions I ask marketers is, tell me the difference between an observation and an insight, because they are different. But if you have really, really solid human truths going into your work, you don't need spectacle. You just deliver the truth to the customer and it cuts through. And we've found that to be a phenomenal thing for us. I mean, we're doing ads with $39 stock photography in them. And that's part of the ad is like, why is there $39 stock photography of a snowman with sparklers for arms? We're not really sure, but hey, 'tis the season, and it saved us money on this, so we can do this. It just sort of, it happens naturally and it feels right, but it's all born on that human truth, which is customers believe you get what you pay for, right? And we have to break that human truth. That's really what we're setting out to do.
That's great. And I love the word human truth, right? Because I mean, my favorite quote, the best description I've ever heard about advertising is the truth well told, right? So, but it starts with the truth. So let's talk about how you get there, kind of shift into some learnings you have, some lessons from the people you collaborated with. You mentioned Tom Wagner. He's the principal of the Wagner Consulting Group and an adjunct professor at UC Irvine. You said you learned from him all great creatives begin with a strong consumer insight. So how do you work with Tom, and what other ways you work with to get to those human truths to kind of start there?
Yeah, Tom and I just for those listening, so you're not like, how does he get all this from this person? Tom and I worked together at Taco Bell. Tom built the consumer insights division at Taco Bell. Had the pleasure of working with him for a number of years. When I left and started Mint and we were working on Mint, I used to take the train down to San Diego and go see Tom and spend a day with Tom And Tom's not a telco guy, which I love. And Tom's a big fan of outside in thinking. So we were able to really pressure test and think through some of the strategic decisions we were doing. And Tom always wants to be, like start from the outside in, right? What does the consumer believe, right? What type of insight is it? Because there's 4 types. Let's identify that. Then let's solve for where they are, right? Start with the customer first. Don't start with the company. Whether it, you could talk about marketing, you could be talking about products, services, but if you start with the company, you're solving for an internal stakeholder. If you start outside, you're solving for the external stakeholder, the customer. Almost every time, it's better to start outside, solve for them, and then make it fit within the inside construct. I know it can't work every time perfectly, but at least there you're solving for the customer want, need, desire. You start internally, you're going to start making products that service the business, but maybe not a consumer want or need. And I think you can extrapolate that to communications quite easily. If you want to sell a message, perfect example, unlimited. Mint sells unlimited. We launched it a couple years ago. The marketplace is not asking for another unlimited plan. Everybody's got one, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just, come on. But what we learned, and this is something I think that's transformative for our brand and our business, is that customers want unlimited as a security blanket. They also don't want to get over because they've been burned, right? Like in years past, when I had minutes, I got this $400 bill one time, so I'm scared forever. Well, some of the carriers, they're predatory on that fear, right? Okay, cool. Mint's going to do different. So we took that security blanket and the fear of overpaying, and we architected the marketing into our unlimited plan, which we call unlimited. Okay, so what happens with Mint is you buy the unlimited plan, you're using it for 3 months, and at the end of your 3 months, we actually send you an email that says, Daniel, thank you for being a Mint customer. We've been looking at your usage, and you only use 8 gigabytes of data a month. You don't need unlimited. We're recommending you pay us less going forward. You move to our more affordable 10 gigabyte plan, which will save you $10 a month off of what you're already paying us. And if at any point you need more data, you can always upgrade and we'll prorate the difference. Super consumer centric, all outside in thinking. And our unlimited plan launched with this concept, and it has been phenomenal. And we knew the marketplace didn't want unlimited or want another unlimited plan, so we had to do something different. And that to me is an example of how you start outside in, you listen to the consumer, and that drives products, messaging, all that stuff. So even though all great creative begins with an insight, I think product and service can begin with a strong consumer insight, and it gives you the opportunity to put the marketing into it, because I believe the best marketing is the stuff you don't have to put on TV. The customer finds it and they're like, oh, this is amazing. I got to tell someone. And we see it on Twitter. We see people take that email and put it on Twitter and go, who the F is doing this? What company tells you to send them less money? And we build loyalty through that.
Yeah, that's disruptively strong customer service. That's beautiful. Let me ask you this, because, something we talk about frequently on this podcast is you are not the customer, right? So for many, I use an example, when I started out, one of my first jobs as a copywriter in an ad agency, I was writing for properties in Vale Valley and Bachelor Gulch Village and all these, and I didn't have an understanding of, I was just fresh out of college, I didn't have an understanding what it was to be like a titan of the universe who owned these things. But yours is kind of a unique product in that we're essentially all customers of it. And, we've written an article before about, with marketers, where do you get your inspiration? And one that really struck with me was one marketer, he talked about, I was playing on the floor with Hot Wheels with my nephew, and then it gave me an idea for how to communicate about like crash rates in California for like a law firm. So I just wonder, like, as it sounds like you're doing some great outside research for that outside in thinking to help understand the customer. But what do you and your team and like as your own personal experience, does that ever play in? Because that's a great example where we get into work, right? And you get into maybe some giant company, you think, oh, this unlimited plan, and you're just kind of selling it out there. But you don't stop and think like, wait a minute, do I need the unlimited plan? And what would I want as a customer, which is beautiful. Them to say, wait a minute, you don't need that. You're overpaying us. So has that ever come up, any of your kind of personal experiences, your team's personal experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I am old school. I'm showing you, but I know we're on a podcast. I keep a book of notes. I have had one of these my entire career. I've had multiple, but I take compelling advertising, work that I feel is insanely good. And back in the olden days, I used to cut it out of a magazine and put it in here. Now I'll take a screen grab, I'll do something, but I try to keep a catalog of work that I feel is just really breakthrough. And it could be any category, but I'm looking for people who are solving problems in ways I hadn't expected before. But when it comes to like, where do I go to fish for really great inspiration? For my brands, I go to Reddit, believe it or not. Reddit is incredible. So Reddit to me is a social media platform where you can have a healthy conversation, which I don't think the others are sort of predicated on healthy, productive, constructive conversations. And Reddit can devolve quickly too, let's be honest. But we're in there, myself and one of our co-founders, Rizwan, we're in there daily. And I'm in there mixing it up with the customers. I'm reading, learning, understanding. What are the issues? What are the opportunities? I get in and add clarity where I can, but we start to see things there. You can start to see trends emerge and conversations people are having because everybody's very transparent. And I'll get in and ask questions. And we use that as direct input into shaping what we do future forward. I can look at the almost 6 years of history of this brand and combine both Reddit commentary along with sort of internal customer surveys and see how there is a direct correlation between the two. And you can see the actions we've taken as a company to better our product, service, offer, everything based on that. And then you can see the conversation shift in these mediums, which it's real fulfilling and it's real immediate, which is incredible because a lot of times for research, you've got to wait till the next research cycle, or are we getting the people who have seen the stimulus? You go to Reddit and man, they're giving you feedback 5 minutes after the email drops in their inbox or after the notification comes out, and it is positive or negative. You can have a dialogue with them and it usually doesn't devolve into vulgarity and you're just some corporate shill and whatever colorful language they want to employ.
So that's really interesting. So I've definitely, and anyone listening, I think something that's super helpful is, even if you're in B2B, going on to whatever forum is for your organization, going onto social media, if you're in B2C, a lot of times Yelp or Google reviews, there's so many places where you can see these days the thing we used to try to, figure out 2 or 3 decades ago, that water cooler talk, that neighbors talking to each other. They're doing it right now publicly on social media and on the internet. You can listen. But you're saying, I haven't gotten this far. Are you interacting as Aaron from Mint Mobile with them, or are you just kind of passively listening to their conversations?
No, so yesterday there was a post. Somebody celebrated their 5-year anniversary, which always perks my ears up because we're about to hit 6 years old. So someone who's been with us from the start. They posted the email campaign or the email notice that we had, congratulating them on 5 years. Somebody else commented that they love the marketing we do and love all the writing and this and that, and they wish they could work here. And I said, I jumped in. I'm like, what do you do? Because we've got a lot of openings. And then all of a sudden the conversation just exploded. It was like, are you kidding me? The CMO is actually in here reading this stuff and is looking for work. As it turns out, the person is a writer. We don't have any writer openings right now. But I said, ping me on LinkedIn and just tell me you're the person, because it's got their username. I don't know their real name. Tell me you're the Redditor, and I'll let you know when that copywriting role comes up so you can apply for it. But I'm in there every single day. Our co-founder's in there almost every single day. It's just something we do so we keep a pulse on the business.
That's great. And I feel like probably a lot of C-level executives feel like they don't have the time for that. So like, do you time box that? Like, how do you make the time to do that? Seems like a very high priority for you.
I'm doing it right. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not doing it right now. No, look, everybody's heard the cliche, find something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. I'm a workaholic. I'm addicted to this thing. I love it. It's been so much fun for me to build this brand and see it grow that, quite frankly, I can't stop. So if I have 5 minutes, I'll just go to Reddit real quick. It doesn't take much. I mean, you got phones and laptops and everything. You just go, you read 2 or 3, and then maybe there's nothing, maybe there's something, quick comment, and then I'll come back later. So I don't time block, but if I can get 5 or 10 minute increments, I'll just go check it like I would check the news.
All right, great. So you mentioned 5 years, almost about to hit your 6-year anniversary. So over 5 years, 90,000%, I believe, is the growth number. That's congratulations. That's gaudy
Yes.
and amazing.
It doesn't seem real, okay? I fully admit to those listening who are like, bullshit. I get it. I have to pinch myself when I see what's happening because it doesn't seem real. But that is the real growth number. And Ultra, our sister brand, won, like I said earlier, the fastest growing company in 2015 on the Inc. 5000. Mint may have been disqualified from winning that contest because it was a subsidiary of the holding company and we were disqualified. That may have been what have happened, which is why we haven't submitted for that growth mark again. But yeah, it's insane.
Well, here's why that's phenomenal. I mean, obviously, on its own, it's phenomenal. But here's another reason it's phenomenal. And I want to get into one more customer insight you were mentioning to me is this is not white space. This is not, I was fortunate earlier in my career to work with VMware and virtualization software, new space growing like crazy, right? You are in a very bloody market. It's not like there's tons of new people all of a sudden need cell phones. So I wanted to talk about one other insight you had into customers, and that at first you mentioned it was almost too cheap, like the price was too cheap, which is very kind of goes against the gut feeling we would have. It's let's make it as cheap as possible. People know what a cell phone is, and I think that's why you did what you did with your advertising, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, when we started, like many startups, entrepreneur, we believed in bootstrapping, right? So Ultra was the flagship brand. Much of the organization was focused on Ultra. A small group of individuals were working on Mint. And it was really hard at first. And the customer response was very much, it can't be any good at that price. And that was really hard to swallow. So we ended up running a test, no risk, no reward. We ran a test where we did all kinds of things. We changed the positioning of the price. We changed the presentation of it, and then we raised the price. Of all the testing we did, we found that raising the price increased velocity the most, and when we talked to the customer, the noise was still there of how can it be any good at $15 a month, but it certainly wasn't as loud as it was when the price was lower.
It's a great insight, great reason to be testing and experimenting. But
look, I understand the laws of economics and that, price and demand curves. I was astonished, shocked, floored to see that raising price had the inverse effect. And it was like nothing I had ever heard of before.
I think that I'm glad you bring up economics, because one thing I've kind of always learned in marketing, we learned in Economics 101, supply and demand and all these things. And one thing I've read a lot in my career that's helped is behavioral economics. So we had Dr. Dan Ariely speak before, and these types of people, because, I always felt Economics 101, it assumes rational thinking based on customers and based on all of us, that like, okay, supply and demand will just, kind of work out because we're all rational actors. We're not rational actors as human beings and customers. And that's something we as marketers have to realize.
Paying $7 for a water over coffee grounds, that's not rational. Like there's so many things that don't make sense, but I love it. The marketplace doesn't always follow what you would expect. So I think that's part of the reason why you've got to be open to failing, because you want to be pushing against these boundaries.
Let me ask you something else. As we talked about that massive growth, I mean, it's hard for everyone to hire talent right now. If you're growing quickly, I'm sure you're bringing in a lot of talent. And I want to talk about someone earlier in your career who really had an impact about building a culture where someone would want to work. Dave Ryan, who is a founder and owner of Ryan Partnership. You said F.B.N.A was what he would sign every email, every memo with. So tell us, what did you learn from this F.B.N.A? What does it mean? How did you first learn about it?
Yeah. So imagine starting at a new agency, which for my agency people, probably every 18 to 24 months, they're doing this. You get in there and, young account director, excited, getting to know the team. I was in a satellite office. Dave was in our Wilton, Connecticut HQ. I was in Los Angeles. You'd see the emails come through. You'd see the memos come through. We were working on a new business pitch, maybe 6 months into my tenure there. And we had finished our rehearsals. End of the day, everybody walks down the street, was at the bar, drinking beer, having a good time, a little relaxing. And I sat next to Dave and I asked him, I'm like, Dave, I got to ask you. You keep signing all these emails, F.B.N.A. What does that mean? And he just like he's told the story 1,000 times. He goes, free beer, no assholes. And I'm going, what? What? Did the owner of the company just tell me F.B.N.A is free beer and assholes? What does that mean, Dave? And the explanation is beautiful. So free beer represents reward. If you work at an agency, there is no 40-hour week. There is no open weekends. Like this is you grind at an agency. His point was, because we grind and we work so hard, there needs to be immediate rewards in what we do. And if you've had a long day and you need a break, there will always be cold beer in the fridge. Just go have one. Right? Free beer, the reward side. Loved it. Secondarily is no assholes. And sort of he dovetails right into the explanation. He's like, with those rewards, because we work so hard, part of that hard work is because we are an agency. We are outside these companies we work with. We're partners with them. But we're getting beat up all the time. We've got competitive agencies. We've got to deal with vendors. We've got procurement. We've got this. We've got that. We've got all these challenges. The absolute last thing I am going to do is hire an asshole in this company. So now you've got to deal with somebody internally to make your life more complicated. Free beer, no assholes. And I was like, my head exploded. I mean, this thing left such an imprint on me that like I've carried it my entire career. I love telling the story. I love telling it in interviews today because that's really why I interview everybody, is I want them to understand this is a no asshole environment and we're all one team and we're working together. And I love the idea of rewarding your employees immediately, whether it's recognition or a free beer, whatever it may be. But I also love the fact that we protect what we're building here internally. And that thought of protecting the agency, when you carry it to the organizational side, it creates this culture where just people are good to each other, they help each other, and we're pushing things forward. And yes, there's healthy conflict, there's disruption because of this conflict, but it's always meant to push the business forward. And that is amazing because you cannot live in this world today and not have, conflicting points of view. How you work through those conflicting points of view is everything today.
Yeah, for those listening, I know you can't see Aaron. Aaron is wearing a ball cap, and while he's telling the story, he actually turned the ball cap around because I feel like it reminded him of a younger, cooler self who was living this F.B.N.A lifestyle.
All right, that's it.
Now we're going to get serious. Let's get moving forward again, the ball cap. But okay, so we talked about the no asshole part, right? How you trust your gut and kind of how you interview and get that in there. So how do you now the free beer part? When we did the article with you, it sounds like you have a pretty cool campus, a lot of perks there for employees. But this weird COVID era we live in, with how have you been rolling out that free beer part, so to speak?
Yeah, there's a ton. So we do them within the department and within the organization. Our company. It's happened to me. This isn't the third time in my entire career this has happened where I've caught lightning in a bottle. So at Ryan, Ryan grew when I was there. I got hired. There were 7 people in that satellite office. There were like 77 when I left. So to see an office explode like that is special. At Taco Bell, we went from $5 billion in annual sales our first year to $9 billion when I left. So that kind of explosive growth. These things are very, very rare. This company has this magic right now. And I think it starts with the leadership team, such a good, solid group. We listen and care. Like, it's a privately owned company. It's founder run, if you will. The 2 founders are still very much into the business. And we do things that are just right to do by people. So the free beer component, when the pandemic hit, we increased the frequency of our town halls. We used to do them in person, do them quarterly. We switched to weekly because the employees were very, very concerned. What's going on with the company? How are we doing? So we did that, and we were very transparent with the teams. But those can get kind of boring. So we started bringing in trivia. So we use Slack as a tool within our company, and we have these town halls where everybody dials in on a phone, everybody's on mute, but also everybody is in the same Slack channel, and we'll do sort of like a Win Ben Stein's money, if you remember that game, but we call it David, our CEO's money. So they're ultra bucks, and we do trivia, and you've got to beat David to the answer, and David doesn't know the question. So sometimes, like, we're constantly giving rewards, but beyond that, we're also making sure that the employee is set up. I think some of this is a recognition of we're not in this is a bold new workplace. So when we told everybody it's time to work from home, we made sure everybody had high quality chairs, solid internet connection, microphones, lights, whatever. At the beginning of the pandemic, if you remember, there was a toilet paper shortage, there was a hand sanitizer shortage, masks were in high demand. So our CEO is sort of like a super freak genius when it comes to this stuff. And he realized you couldn't get sanitizer in 3-ounce canisters. But if you wanted to buy a 90-gallon drum of sanitizer, those were everywhere. So we created sort of like this employee care kit where in our office, we had some employees basically mask up and glove up and the whole thing. And we used it was like a pressurized tube to take the 90 gallons of sanitizer and put them into sort of like individual handheld things. We bought tons of masks. We had masks made, and we just sent them out to the employees. We did things like we have a chef for our campus. She cooks lunch and breakfast and snacks for all the employees. Well, everybody's at home. David's genius again. We don't want to lose Amy. Amy's amazing, but there's nobody to make food for in the office. So David says, well, what if we take what she's great at, which is prepping meals, and instead of prepping lunch for hundreds, what if we switch her deliverable to she's going to cook dinners for families of 5, and then swing by the office any point throughout the day, and there will be a take-home dinner for you and your family. So Amy's happy. Amy still gets to do what she wants as the chef. The employees still win. Like, it's sort of like those win-win things, and that's something our company is doing all the time to try and make sure that even though this sort of cataclysmic pandemic is happening, we're always trying to do right by the employee, even if it's something as small as a care package being sent home or tweaking what Amy does so people can get a home-cooked meal. And I'll tell you, there's a Google sheet that has these meals, and when she posts, like, hey, just posted dinners for next week, you can watch you used to see in the office, everybody run to go get donuts or whatever from the kitchen. Now you see people flooding into these Google sheets, putting their names in on the slots for dinner. And I think, you could do little things like that all the time, as well as bigger recognition and call outs in public forums, because you've got to be, this is a world where it's a recognition-based culture now. We're firm believers in that. So we're constantly bringing the free beer to the party.
That's great. And let me tell you, I'll tell you one quick anecdote because I think some big companies really dropped the ball on COVID. So one of my neighbors works in IT for this huge Fortune 500 brand. And he was telling me, during COVID, he's like, man, my back's killing me. And I was just in his house. I was like, wait a minute, where are you sitting and working? And he was sitting on this rattan chair. And I said, why don't you get your chair from your office? He's like, no, the facility's closed. No one could go in there. And so I ended up grabbing him a chair from our warehouse and giving one of ours. And he's like, it changed his life. His back felt better. But I got to ask you real quick, did the chair budget end before it got to you? Because you're showing me you sit on like a bench.
No. Well, the truth is I like to move. So I have a very beautiful, comfortable chair outside, and I live in Southern California, so it's 72 almost all the time, and I like to be outside. You're catching me in the quasi dining room / living room, playroom for our son. So there's basketball hoops and footballs and Legos and stuff in here, but
that's a great lesson, actually. When we started working at home, I realized, I thought that I worked in my office a lot, but really moved around because I had all these meetings. And when the meetings went to Zoom, I got so tired and, your shoulders got so tense. And that's one thing I started doing too. I'm like, okay, in the morning, I'll sit outside. Then I'll go sit here. I'll sit there and really move around.
The thing that I love the most is when somebody says, let's have a call. I'm like, oh, call, super in. Like, I will be walking around the neighborhood.
Yes. Stop with the video call. Sorry, I'm making you do a video call right now. Stop with the video calls. I like to just get on a call. I have a pond behind my house. It's just great to look at nature for a few minutes instead of a computer. So,
well, I'll tell you, the pandemic has changed everything, particularly the way we work. And I have seen some of the questions, so I know one of these is going to come up. I can share with you how speed has totally transformed the way we work.
Let's talk about that next. Yes, actually, I was going to ask about, you mentioned the last person you learned from is George Dewey, the president of Maximum Effect, or I believe is one of your marketing agencies, and this idea of Fastertizing. So what is Fastertizing?
Well, I got to make sure I say it right because I always abuse it, but I think it's Fastertizing.
Oh, sorry,
right? So
Fastertizing. Okay.
Right, it's fast advertising. Fastertizing. But so this is something that George is Ryan's writing partner, business partner. The two have worked as a team for many, many years. George is the president of Maximum Effort, which is our agency. He's also got a background in copywriting. So he was an ex-agency guy. He actually led the business on one of our competitors. Now, this is long before Mint ever existed, but he's got wireless in his background, which it makes this so much more fun. But they are big on creative over production, so character over spectacle. And for them, speed and relevance is really, really important. And obviously, Ryan is an actor and a movie star. He's got as well a huge social media influence, and he's incredibly dialed in on Twitter, very, very savvy, fun, and witty. But when you operate in that world, speed is a necessity. Speed is not sort of something you want to have. To do things right, you have to do them quickly. And I have learned so much from them on speed. I can give you a very good and relevant example that just happened. I want to say in the last 2 weeks, but I can't even pin it down because we work so fast. It seems like it might have been 6 months ago. But Dave Foley, who is an actor, some of you may know him from news radio, tweeted, "I've seen all these Mint Mobile commercials. Boy, I'd like to be in one," or something like that. I can't even remember the tweet now. I didn't see it, but it came from Dave and it tagged Ryan or Mint or something. And I get a call, actually I got a text message from George that's like, "Hey, can you talk real quick?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course." Jump on the phone. He's like, "I'm on my way to set right now. Can you approve this script via text message?" And I'm like, "What are we shooting? What are you talking about?" And he's like, "Oh, well, this tweet just came out like 30 minutes ago and we've reached out to Dave. We're going to be filming Dave in the next hour or two because we happen to have a different shoot for something else going on over here and he can meet at set." And I was like, wait a minute. There's a tweet? You've got a script? We're shooting today? It's airing tomorrow? And like, you've got to be like, in today's world, that spot was shot, cut, delivered, and live inside of 24 hours, which...
That's amazing.
I've never seen anything like it. It's amazing. It's fun. It's so cool. But you end up working differently. Like we work through SMS. I have never in my agency days or my Taco Bell days approved scripts over SMS. We're making these decisions, but they have to happen at such a rapid pace. You've got to change the technologies you're using. You've got to change your approach. But again, we didn't do some big giant production. Dave's in a chair. Dave's talking about how he saw the commercials and he actually switched. And he's like, hey, it's actually, being in the commercial is great, but holy smokes, the service is phenomenal too. I already made my first call. Like, wait, so you did all this and he's on the service all within an hour or two? But I think that is so new and so part of the world today that is a big piece of what we do. And I think I'm trying to think of the takeaway, because the takeaway is, it's okay to bend and break the rules you've established for how you work. Like, don't be afraid of failure. There's a lot of things sort of wrapped up into speed and able to get marketing out at rapid pace.
Well, I think there's another beautiful takeaway that we've learned from you so far is the amount where you are trying to listen to and learn from your customers. I call it customer intimacy, where you want to just really know them so well. I know Dave is somewhat famous, but he was still just a person out there tweeting about your brand. And, you guys were right on it. I think that's beautiful. It always boggles my mind and drives me nuts when I get an email. I actually got, I won't mention the name, but from a very big cell phone company the other day, and it was a no reply email. And I had replied to it. It was for business service. I had replied to it, and I just got an undeliverable back. And it drives me crazy when brands treat their customers that way. So I think one beautiful lesson also is just really being that intimate with your customers. We learned a lot from, it seems like a small detail. I think it's you providing chairs to your employees during COVID, to telling your customers when they can buy less from you. So the big question I have to leave you with at the end, with all these things that, we've gone all through the universe of what marketers have to do today. What are the key qualities of an effective marketer? What do we need? What qualities do we need to be able to do this?
That's a great question. If I'm looking at like a high quality marketer, a person that I want on my team, I'm looking for several things. Like, obviously listening. You have to be a good listener. You have to be able to also be honest with yourself and understand that you're not going to know everything and that you're going to make mistakes. Like, sort of this self-identification of knowing that marketing is an art. It combines science, but it's an art. Not everything's going to work. You got to be okay with that. A good listener, sort of self-awareness. I love creativity. So I like marketers who like to think and come up with ideas and be idea builders. One of the things I like to do is ask people, if you're killing an idea, well, what kind of feedback did you give? Did you kill it completely, or did you give constructive feedback in a manner where the idea is not dead? It can be resurrected if it's going to take a different approach. Because I believe the idea graveyard should be almost empty, because there's typically a really good nugget somewhere in there, and it can be part of a new idea or an idea all on its own. So I love creativity. And I like tenacity. There's a lot of no in marketing. There just is. You get shot down and denied and turned down all the time. You gotta be tenacious. You gotta be one of those down 7, up 8 kind of people. I'll get knocked down 7 times, but I'm getting up 8. You gotta be good with that. And those are the people I like to work with, because it's never a complete failure. It's always a fail forward, fail and learn. And we'll solve this, pushing through. Particularly when you're going against gargantuan competitors. You have to be excited about that kind of stuff. I typically don't hire wireless people. I don't think, maybe 2 in the marketing department, 3, but I'm not looking for people who have deep, rich knowledge in wireless sector. I'm looking for creative thinkers, creative problem solvers, smart folks who want to be the dumbest person in the room. That's what I'm looking for. People smarter than me. So that way, when I get to be around these folks, I get to learn and get better.
And that's why this job is so fun, too. What other industry are you in where you get to be that creative, right? Where you get to reach out to Dave Foley and try to get him to film and add that in. That's awesome.
Yes, It's so awesome. It's the coolest job ever.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time, Aaron. I've learned so much.
Yes, thank you. This was absolutely real fun, so I can't wait to do it again.
And thanks to everyone for listening. I hope you learned a lot.
Thank you for joining us for How I Made It in Marketing with Daniel Burstein. Now that you've gotten inspiration for transforming yourself as a marketer, get some ideas for your next marketing campaign from Marketing Sherpa's extensive library of free case studies at marketingsherpa.com. That's marketing, SHERPA.com.